several breathing tests, a mask covering the face, and continuously consuming medications. That's the life of a cystic fibrosis patient. So I asked a couple of people about this disease, and a lot of them answered that they didn't know much about the disease. So in a very basic definition, cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease that affects many organs, but mainly the lungs. So a quick overview of the lungs: there's the trachea, then the bronchi, and finally the bronchioles. In a normal pair of lungs, the airways in the lungs are coated with this slimy texture known as mucus. The role of the mucus is to filter out the air that is inhaled, so take out the germs, the dust, or the dirt in the air. And then as soon as it's completed, the mucus is taken out through the help of a hair-like organelle known as cilia. However, in cystic fibrosis, a CF patient doesn't really experience this. In cystic fibrosis, the airways are coated with mucus, but the mucus is actually this hard texture, therefore the cilia is unable to move it. The mucus does capture dust and germs, but it's just not able to be taken out of the lungs. Therefore, it can turn into other problems such as blocked airways, or this mucus can actually turn into bacteria in the lungs. For a CF patient, the mucus is thicker than normal. That's why the cilia can't really move it. And that's like asking an ant to push over an elephant. Nearly impossible. But why does this happen in the first place? That's because of the CFTR protein, also known as the cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductance regulator protein. So this protein is actually a chloride channel, and a channel is something that helps transport molecules in and out of a cell. Cystic fibrosis, a patient actually has a dysfunctional CFTR protein. This means that that protein is not working properly, therefore creating an imbalance in the cells because it's not secreting or absorbing molecules properly. So proteins are actually made through three main stages known as transcription, translation, and trafficking. And during this process, a bunch of amino acids actually form together to make a protein. Proteins are made up of amino acids. And in a CFTR protein, there needs to be specific types of amino acids to actually make the protein. There are many mutations in cystic fibrosis, but one of the most common ones is the F508del, which is a mutation that involves a lack of an amino acid. And that name of the amino acid is phenylalanine. Phenylalanine is responsible for creating the structure of the CFTR protein, but since in cystic fibrosis it lacks this amino acid, the CFTR protein forms this abnormal structure, therefore it's not able to work properly. The mutation actually targets a specific part of the CFTR protein, and there are 5 main parts. In a CFTR protein, there are 2 transmembrane domains, such as TMD1 and TMD2. There's also 2 cytoplasmic nucleotide binding domains, known as NBD1 and NBD2, and there's 1 regulatory domain. So the mutation actually targets the NBD1, which could have a huge impact on the respiratory secretions and absorptions in the sweat gland. So this is an example of the sweat gland. Water, sodium, and chloride would be extruded through the epithelial cells and then reabsorbed, and finally brought to the skin as sweat. But in cystic fibrosis, these 3 elements are actually extruded but not reabsorbed. So therefore, this hypertonic solution is actually taken out on the skin. It's a bit different in respiratory secretions. What happens is that chloride is secreted and then sodium and water is reabsorbed. But in cystic fibrosis, it's a bit different. Since the CFTR protein isn't really working, the chloride gets trapped inside the cell. Therefore, the sodium in the water is significantly increased. Notice there is some sort of green thing on the screen, and that's the mucus. So if the mucus lacks water, since the water is being reabsorbed into the epithelial cells, the mucus loses some sort of hydration. Therefore, it becomes thick. So I guess that's all. That's cystic fibrosis. This disease has been here for almost 100 years, and a lot of organizations are approaching this problem through personalized medicines, such as modulators. So far, there are 3 main types of CFTR modulators that are being used by hospitals to this date. This includes potentiators, amplifiers, and correctors. Though we don't have a cure for cystic fibrosis, Many of these treatments, such as modulators, are being used, and since it's taking the path of precision medicine, it has helped many people.